Julia, and here on this channel I talk about all the books that I'm reading and sometimes other things, especially around me being a highly sensitive person and how that affects what media I consume. And why I really wanted to start this channel was to share the books that I'm reading along with how they rank for me on an HSP scale, which if you're interested in hearing more about that, I'll link that video below where I go in depth about the HSP scale and just making sure that I share content warnings, because I think that is super important, at least for me, when it goes into reading a book, because I want to be able to have an enjoyable experience when I read a book. So I wanted to share that with other people and give that representation, not just as an HSP, but as a Black biracial author as well. So today I am going to be talking about the recent reads that I've had. I had a big period of time where I wasn't reading, and that was really hard, but I'm finally back into reading a bunch. And so I have a bunch of books to talk about and share my thoughts. And all of them are linked below with the content warnings, with the HSP scale, though I'll mention that a little bit in the video, and a link to their StoryGraph page, which is where all the content warnings are and where I get those. And I really hope you enjoy this video. I haven't posted in so long, and that feels really sad, but I'm back and I'm very excited to share more about my books. I have been going through a lot of mental and physical health issues that have just made it hard to really sit down and share my thoughts about books, but I hope you enjoy this video, and be sure to comment below any thoughts you have about later content or what books you are reading right now. So I recently just finished Wash Day Diaries. It's a graphic novel, really beautiful artistry, and I had a lot of fun reading it. It's all about these four best friends who we have individual stories about them, and we follow each one as they have a kind of wash day and take care of their hair as Black women. And so that was very the representation was wonderful, and then also follows some of their personal stories or their struggles, and then they all meet up at the end, and it shows their friendship. And it was just adorable and really fun and a fast read. I'm not usually a graphic novel kind of person, but I thought I would check this one out. And I'll also link below the person who I watched their booktube video about it and decided to check it out, so definitely check that out. And I'll leave all of the content warnings below, but this was definitely a mild book for me, just because of some of the mentions of like mental health that were happening, of sharing about the people's life, but definitely recommend. And I enjoyed reading this, and I'm so glad that I'm having fun getting back into reading. This book was really fun for me to read. It follows this girl who goes to a summer camp for deaf and blind kids, and she's going to be a counselor there. And what I really loved about this story was, number one, being able to educate myself about the deaf community, but also because she is someone who doesn't know ASL and is learning ASL and wears hearing aids, she often struggles with fitting in the kind of hearing world and deaf world, and it's kind of her journey in figuring out who she is and being proud of who she is. So I really enjoyed that aspect and had a good time learning more about the camp, and it had that kind of summer vibes, which was really fun. So really enjoyed reading this book. And I read it in a day and I read it outside. So it was like, again, a perfect kind of summer book. Highly recommend it. HSP wise, I would say that I'm gonna say mild to moderate, just because there is a scene in here that involves the police that I had a hard time reading, and I did a lot of skimming. So I would warn you about that, but of course all the content warnings can be found below this video. But besides that, I had a safe time reading this book, and there is like a little romance in it, and it's a more kind of a little bit more of a slow burn, and I really enjoyed that aspect as well. So great fun. Kind of following that theme of not fitting in and trying to find yourself was American Born Chinese. So you'll have to let me know in the comments below if you've heard of this book, if you've read it, if you've watched the TV series yet. So I watched the TV series first, I know, but I watched the TV series first and then read the graphic novel. And I think I mentioned before that graphic novels aren't usually what I go for. And I discovered kind of why sometimes I don't go for graphic novels. And that's because sometimes I can have a harder time connecting with the characters and being able to figure out what exactly is going on by just the images. And I kind of discovered that in Wash Day Diaries as well, of just some of the images were kind of left for interpretation. And that can be really hard for me as an HSP. I really like these kind of concrete, these are how things are happening. And so a kind of mystery, don't know what exactly is happening, can be a little unhelpful. But back to American Born Chinese, I definitely enjoyed reading it because it did help explain some things that weren't explained in the TV show. And I'm kind of glad, I hate to say this, but I'm kind of glad I watched the TV show first because of what I already mentioned around not being able to fully connect or understand what's going on in the book because it's a graphic novel. And so that was really helpful. And I don't know, when thinking about how it compared to the TV show, it was definitely very different and ended very differently. And so I don't know, I can't decide which I prefer, or because they felt so very different. But I did really appreciate the kind of emphasis and conversation this book goes through around how if you don't choose to be yourself, then you can miss out on so much in life and kind of get yourself stuck in a world, not truly living as who you are. And that was really wonderfully weaved through the story of our main character Jin in here, and the story of the mythos of the Monkey King, which this book follows. So yeah, I definitely, if all of this sounds interesting to you, would suggest. And then HSP wise, I'm gonna say closer to a moderate, just because of some of the concepts that are talked about and a little bit of the violence and a little bit of just the kind of discrimination that is being experienced, but otherwise it was mostly safe for me. Next, I read I'll Be the One, and this book I've been meaning to read for a while now, and I'm glad I finally read it. I had a lot of fun, still have those summer vibes that apparently I'm doing with all the books that I'm reading, and I really, really enjoyed the representation of body positivity and within dancing. So our main character Sky is a dancer, but all her life she has been told, mainly by her mother, that fat people don't dance. And she has really grappled with that and found this amazing confidence that I really, really appreciated. It was really nice to go into a book knowing that this character was already pretty confident in herself and was a really good dancer. And it was more of the world around her that she had to deal with, the discrimination and people putting her down because of her size and dancing, especially because in the story she is trying out for a Korean singing and dancing competition. And so she already has that layer of kind of American discrimination around body size, and then plus this Korean industry that she's trying to make a mark in. And there is a little romance on the side that was really adorable, and I found it really well done. I don't know, I think there was some part of me that had a hard time kind of really relating or connecting with some of the characters. But honestly, it was just really fun, and I would say really, really safe. So I would, for HSP Scale, I would definitely put this on safe. And yeah, I just had a really fun time with it, and there were so many beautiful parts to it. And the dance, again, the dance was really fun as well. I would love to see it as a movie. I'm like, where is the movie of this, or even a TV show? Like, I feel like that could be so beautiful. Like, instead of Exo Kitty, you know, if you know, you know. So yeah, really enjoyed this book. So this book has been on my TBR for a long time, ever since it came out after I read the first book in the series by Elizabeth Lim, the Six Crimson Cranes, which I've talked about before and have said that I really enjoy because of these fairy tale vibes. Was really amazing. So Six Crimson Cranes is an Asian interpretation of the Seven Swans, which is a story about a girl whose brothers are all turned into swans, and she has to knit these blankets out of nettle without saying anything to break her brothers from this curse that they've, this curse that they've been put under. And I really enjoyed it, and it was definitely a moderate when it came to HSP Scale, but I was really pleasantly surprised because I felt like I was able to really enjoy it and get through it despite some of the harder topics and more kind of violent elements within the kind of high fantasy, fantasy kind of world of the book. And so I was really, because I enjoyed that book, I was really looking forward to this one. And I'm sad to say I was a little disappointed because it took me a really long time to get into the book. I just kept picking it up and not getting really far. And this one follows our main character as she travels within the dragon world. And, of course, this is the second one, so I'm not going to give anything away. But I think maybe because it's not exactly following that fairy tale story that I was used to. Maybe that was part of why it was hard for me to get into it. But also, it ended up being unsafe. So I was able to finish it. So it's definitely, moderate, unsafe. Like, I did a lot, but I ended up doing a lot of skimming, which I, depending on if you're someone who is an HSP, you may find that really weird, but I still accept that as just a reality that I have to do. It's kind of like having to skip through some things in a movie or TV show you're watching just because it wasn't going to be helpful for me. It could be harmful for me to read. And so I was disappointed because it felt like it just kept going and just all of these things kept happening that I was just like skimming through and not enjoying. And I got to a point of feeling really bad for this world that these characters have to live in, and it was just intense. And so that was really disappointing and wasn't exactly a fun read. And yeah, I definitely think Six Crimson Cranes are going to be a favorite book, but definitely disappointed in the second book, but also kind of proud that I even read the second book, because that usually is not something I'm able to do nowadays. So yeah, definitely Elizabeth Lim is going to be a author that I would recommend because of her writing, etc., and representation and her stories, but definitely I'm not sure totally for me anymore.
I forgot to mention the title and author in my reflection, so here goes. The Storm Makers by Jennifer E. Smith was the next book that I read.
This book was an absolute delight. I had so much fun with it, and I was definitely really surprised. So I've been trying to make sure I read all the books that I have in my collection, because I love having books that I've already read and not books that I haven't, that I don't know if I'll like them, etc. So one of the books that I hadn't read in my collection that I needed to read was this book. And I honestly just had some personal connection to it and felt really seen in a few scenes. And it was just kind of adorable. And I wish I had read it when I was younger, but I really enjoyed it now. Yeah, and the story was not something that really was oh my goodness, so amazing. But I did have fun with this concept around these people that are storm makers, and it kind of feels fitting for the summer as well. And then also the kind of relationship with the siblings was so beautiful, and yeah, I just loved the ending too. I was calling it, and there were a few twists and turns that I didn't see coming, so I had a lot of fun with this book, and definitely recommend, because yeah, it wasn't blew me out of the park or anything, but it was definitely a solid read.
Next, I read Furthermore by Tyra Mafi.
Now this book, because it's a Alice in Wonderland interpretation, I was not thinking that I would enjoy it whatsoever, because I have never enjoyed Alice in Wonderland. One of the books that's kind of based around the Queen of Hearts that I've mentioned before, Heartless, was just so unsafe for me that I'm kind of scarred around the Alice in Wonderland kind of realm. But this was one of the books that I wanted to read to decide if I wanted to keep it, and I plan on keeping it, so that was really cool. And it was just, I was surprised. I had a hard time getting into it, and it was just, had the same kind of Wonderland, weird world, magical world vibes, but there was just these really cool elements about friendship and family, and our main character searching for, kind of being enough as who she is, and that those concepts always feel really important to me. And so I ended up at the end crying. So that was a surprise, but really fun. And I just felt like it was well done, and kind of a heartwarming, cozy kind of story, and definitely on the safer side. I would say a mild maybe, because of some of the kind of concepts around the world and this fantasy world. But otherwise, I definitely can recommend this book. I also was able to finally read this book because the cover is absolutely beautiful. This yellow and these black characters, that it's definitely not Bridgerton. If you know, you know. So that was really exciting for me. I wish that this was a TV show instead of Bridgerton. And so I definitely recommend it. This historical, fiction, and these stories of these young girls trying to find their place in a world as wealthy Black people in this time period and all of what, you know, that means. And there is a second book that I'm waiting on. I'm so disappointed that I decided to read it because now I have to wait for the second book. And it definitely ended on a kind of like conclusion in a way of just like, there's going to be another book. And so that was interesting. And I can't figure out the right words because I feel like there was something missing of like a wow factor. Like all of the books that I've mentioned have been really good, but haven't had the same kind of wow factor as some of my absolute favorite books, which is very interesting because it's a lot of booktubers that I watch. It feels like they're also having a year where there's like either really a lot of DNFs and a lot of really bad books, or all of their books are just kind of fine. And that is really interesting to me. But I'm just happy I am reading a lot more, and that makes me super happy, and it makes me happy to be able to share the books that I'm reading with you. But anyway, back to this book. I definitely appreciated this representation of this time in history, and it felt wonderful to kind of see that story of these wealthy Black entrepreneurs and families that we don't see a lot of, and also them kind of grappling with what that means for them to be in that place. And yeah, I just appreciated a story that wasn't the hardship that, you know, my ancestors have had to go through. And so I definitely appreciated that and really wish that there was this happening more in things like Bridgerton, etc. But again, it didn't have exactly the total wow factor that I was hoping for, because again, the cover is yellow, so it has to be amazing, right? This book was so not fun. I don't even know like how I could have prepared for it, because I had no clue that it would have the effect that it had on me. So definitely, I'm gonna say a moderate for HSP, just because there's this scene that's just really, really scared me, and I felt like really scared for the character, and I don't know, I just didn't expect that to happen. It had these like vibes of like swallows and Amazons, and like kind of this adventure by the sea treasure story, and that felt really fun. And so I think at the beginning that's where I was kind of enjoying it, but also it was a historical fiction that I didn't have a clear understanding of the time period and what was going on, and so there was a lot of things that just kind of missed me, and I was kind of confused at times. And then just like the conclusion really, really frustrated me, and I was so mad about that, but also like kind of scarred because of some of the content. So I would definitely check the content warnings and just be warned. I've mentioned all amazing books, and this is the one that really was not amazing. So yeah, that was definitely a disappointment, but you know, it weeded out a book that now I have read and now I will not have in my collection. Thank you so much for watching, friends. Please like and subscribe. I hope to be publishing more videos in the future, but in the meantime, please comment below and let me know what books you have been reading, what books you want to read within what I shared, if any of the books were interesting, and be sure to follow me on my social medias, Instagram and Facebook, and you can check out my Patreon if you're interested in hearing more about my writing journey. Again, in the meantime, keep resting, resisting, and finding joy. Goodbye for now.